Ever get the feeling that the most powerful forces are kind of, the ones you never see?
Like hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, exactly. And today, we're diving into one of those hidden giants, a company so essential to the tech we all use, but like almost invisible to most people.
They kind of fly under the radar.
They do. It's ASML.
Ah, ASML. Fascinating company, isn't it? They're quietly powering our smartphones, laptops, heck, even those self-driving cars everyone's talking about.
Yeah. Without ASML, the whole digital world, as we know it, it just wouldn't be the same.
It wouldn't exist, period.
So what's their secret? What makes them so indispensable?
It all boils down to one thing, really. Extreme ultraviolet lithography.
Okay, before you lose me with the tech jargon.
No, it's simpler than it sounds, I promise. Imagine the world's most precise stamp etching these impossibly tiny circuits onto silicon wafers. Those are the chips that make everything run.
So they're the stamp maker.
Exactly. And get this. ASML is the only company on the planet that can build these EUV systems, as they're called.
Well, the only company. That's a monopoly.
It is. They have a 100% market share in EUV lithography, which is unheard of in the semiconductor industry.
Cutthroat out there.
Absolutely. And as chips need to get more powerful, smaller, more complex, that dominance, well, it just keeps growing.
So they're not just making money, they're printing it, right?
Well, it's not quite that simple. The semiconductor industry, it's kind of like a roller coaster, up and down, boom and bust. But ASML, they've built a business model that's smarter.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's not just about selling those multi-billion-dollar machines, which, yeah, are amazing, but it's the whole ecosystem they've created, service contracts, software upgrades, even financial help for customers who need it to buy those super expensive systems.
So it's a long-term game for them.
Long-term partnerships. And it works. Just look at their financials. In 2023 alone, they brought in, wait for it, $27.6 billion in net sales.
Whoa. That's $27.6 billion. That's not just a lot of money. That's a lot of money. For our listeners who might not be, financial wizards, what does that actually mean in the grand scheme of things?
Let's put it this way. Their gross margin, 51.3%. That's way above average for the industry.
So they're doing something right.
They are, and not just a one-hit wonder. Their earnings have been growing consistently for years.
So consistent growth, massive profits. I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true. There's got to be more to the story, right?
Well, like any success story, there are challenges. We'll get to those later. But yeah, there's definitely more to it than just numbers. There's the human element, too.
The people behind the scenes. Makes sense.
And speaking of people, you don't achieve this kind of success without a seriously good team at the top. Their CEO, Christophe Fouquet, he's been with ASML since 2008. What's interesting is that he's known for being really, really customer-focused.
So it's not just about squeezing every last euro out of their clients. They're building relationships.
Precisely. And that focus on long-term value, it goes beyond just the CEO. Their whole executive team, they've got tons of experience in the semiconductor world.
So we're talking about industry veterans here.
Yep. In fact, one of their former CEOs ended up on the board of Intel.
Wow, that gotta say something about the talent they attract. But okay,
Yep.
all this talk about profit and leadership. What about the ethical side of things? Do they walk the walk when it comes to their code of conduct?
No, absolutely. It's not just a document. It's deeply ingrained in their culture. Ethics, compliance, environmental responsibility, it's all there. And to back that up, they follow these strict reporting standards.
Standards like what? For those of us who aren't, fluent in accounting lingo.
They use the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI for short. It's all about sustainability, transparency, that kind of thing. And also IFRS EU, which are the accounting rules for the European Union.
So basically they're playing by the rules and being open about it. That's reassuring, especially when you're talking about a company this powerful.
It is. Transparency matters. But there's another big question we haven't addressed yet. With all this going for them, what's ASML actually worth?
That's the million-euro question, isn't it? Or maybe, in ASML's case, the billion-euro question?
Exactly. Because to figure that out, we need to dive into the world of intrinsic value and this thing called discounted cash flow, or DCF analysis.
Okay, hit me with it. What is DCF, and how does it help us figure out what a company is really worth?
Well, it's a way of looking beyond the current stock price, right? Because that can be misleading. It's about figuring out if the market is overvaluing or undervaluing the business based on its future earnings potential.
So we're looking into the future, trying to predict how much money ASML will be making down the road.
In a way, yes. It's about projecting future cash flows, the money coming in, and then we discount those flows back to today's value. because money today is worth more than money tomorrow.
Time travel for investors.
I like that. And right now, analysts are projecting some pretty impressive growth for ASML, around 17% annually for earnings, and for revenue, about 12.1%.
Those are big numbers. What's driving that optimism?
Well, it's the whole semiconductor boom. Demand for advanced chips, it's only going up, driven by, like, everything. Artificial intelligence, 5G, you name it.
And ASML is basically the gatekeeper to that whole world. They hold the keys.
They do, but there's a catch, and it's a big one. These projections, well, they're just that, projections. Different analysts, different models, they can get very different results.
So trying to value ASML is like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
Kind of. Guru Focus, for example, their intrinsic value estimate is about 299 gurnals per share, but Alpha Spread, they say it's closer to 733 way.
Whoa. Talk about difference of opinion.
That's the thing. No crystal ball here. It's why smart investors use a margin of safety. It means buying a stock at a price well below what you think it's really worth, just in case.
A buffer zone, basically. Protect yourself from the unexpected.
Exactly. But before we get too deep into valuation, there's another way to gauge how the market is feeling about ASML right now. Insider activity.
Okay, explain that one. What do you mean by insider activity?
It's all about what the people inside the company are doing with their own stock. Are they buying? Are they selling? That can tell you a lot.
Inside information, huh? Sounds a little sneaky.
No, it's all legal and public information. But you gotta know where to look for it.
So what's the insider buzz on ASML?
It's hard to get specifics. That kind of info isn't always widely available. But what is out there in the news is just as interesting. There's this whole thing about export controls on China, right?
Right. We touched on that earlier.
Well, it directly affects ASML. Those controls, they restrict them from selling their most advanced machines to certain companies in China.
I see. So even though the demand for chips is booming, politics gets in the way.
It does. On the other hand, there's the whole AI boom, and ASML, they're right at the heart of it.
So a mixed bag of challenges and opportunities. Got to keep an eye on both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. Things can change fast in the tech world.
Well, I'd say we've covered a lot of ground here, from ASML's incredible dominance to the complexities of valuing them and even some of the risks they face.
Yeah, and we've only just scratched the surface. This is a company with a lot of moving parts.
That's what makes this deep dive so important, right? We're trying to unpack all of this for our listeners so they can understand the big picture.
And make informed decisions, because ultimately, that's what it's all about.
Exactly. So before we wrap up this first part of our exploration, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just this. ASML, they're a company with huge potential, no doubt. But understanding them, that requires looking beyond the headlines. It's about digging into their financials, their operations, the whole industry they operate in.
Deep dive indeed. We'll be back in part 2 to explore these complexities even further and help our listeners answer the big question: is ASML worth the investment?
Welcome back to our deep dive into ASML. Last time we explored their dominance in the semiconductor industry, their impressive financials, and that whole thing about, trying to value such a unique company. It's tricky.
It really is. And like we touched upon, there are challenges to consider too. It's not all smooth sailing.
Right. Got to look at both sides. What are some of the biggest headwinds ASML might face going forward? Well, one of the most significant has got to be the whole geopolitical situation, specifically the export controls on China.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly last time, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper. How much of ASML's revenue actually comes from China? And what could the impact of these restrictions really be?
ASML, they don't actually break down their revenue by country, so it's a bit of a guessing game.
Okay, so we're into estimations here.
Right. Analysts figure China makes up maybe 15% of their sales, give or take.
So not a tiny amount.
Yeah.
And these export controls, they're specifically about their most advanced EUV machines, right?
Yeah, certain Chinese companies are basically cut off from buying them. It could definitely put a dent in their sales.
That's got to be a concern for investors.
It is. And the long-term consequences, well, those are even harder to predict. It's complex.
How so?
Well, on one hand, these restrictions, they're probably going to slow down China's progress in making their own advanced chips, but it also kind of lights a fire under them,
They're going to be even more motivated to catch up.
Exactly. So could it hurt ASML in the short term? Yeah, maybe. But in the long run, it might just make their tech even more valuable. Everyone wants what they can't have.
Scarcity creates demand. Makes sense.
The other thing to think about is, how long can ASML really hold on to this near monopoly they've got in the EUV space?
Yeah, someone's got to be coming for them, right? with all the money at stake.
You can bet on it. At companies like Intel, Samsung, they've got the resources, the ambition. They're not going to just sit back and watch.
But earlier you mentioned how incredibly difficult it would be to replicate what ASML does. Their supply chain, that tech. Is it impossible?
It's close to impossible. I mean, these EUV machines, we're talking over 100,000 parts, super specialized suppliers, relationships ASML's built over, like, decades.
So it's not just about money. It's know-how, connections, the whole package.
Yep. That said, never underestimate companies like Intel. They've been innovating in this space forever.
True. So they might not copy ASML directly, but maybe they come up with a different way to get there or focus on a different part of the market.
Could happen. The landscape shifts. That's just how tech works.
Okay, so we've got geopolitical risks, competition heating up. Anything else investors should be watching out for?
Well, there's always the risk that comes with any company that's so reliant on basically one product, right? Even if that product is as vital as these EUV machines.
Put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing.
Kinda. If demand for these super advanced chips were to drop off suddenly, or, some totally new tech came out of nowhere, ASML could be in trouble.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But they are investing heavily in R&D, right?
Yes.
Trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Oh, yeah, big time. Over $3.3 billion in 2023 alone. Shows you how seriously they're taking innovation.
They're not just resting on their laurels.
Nope. But even with that kind of spending, there are no guarantees. R&D, it's a long game. Maybe those bets don't pay off, or maybe a competitor beats them to the punch.
So good sign, but gotta factor in the uncertainty. Okay, enough doom and gloom for now. We've talked about the risks. Let's get back to those potential rewards. Remember those projections, 17% annual earnings growth. What's fueling that optimism?
It's a few things, really. First, the demand for advanced semiconductors. It's not slowing down, not even close. AI, 5G, the Internet of Things, everything's going digital.
ASML's riding that wave.
And they're the only surfboard out there. Second, ASML, they've got a track record. They deliver, they exceed expectations. They've weathered industry ups and downs before.
But those high expectations, they're already baked into their stock price.
Yeah.
Like some analysts say it's overvalued.
Yeah, that's the debate. So how do you figure out what a fair price for ASML actually is? Well, one way is that discounted cash flow, the DCF we talked about.
But those models, they can spit out some pretty different numbers.
They do. Different assumptions you plug in, different results you get out. That's why you got to look at multiple models, understand the limitations. Don't take any one number as gospel.
So more of a guideline than a rule book.
Right. And beyond just the numbers, you got to look at the bigger picture. ASML's competitive position, the whole regulatory landscape, how well they can adapt to new tech. And of course, your own goals, your own risk tolerance.
Sounds like investing in ASML is not for the casual observer.
It's not a set it and forget it kind of investment, that's for sure. It takes research, patience, and a willingness to stay informed. Things change fast in this industry.
Speaking of change, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked numbers, we've talked risks. What about sustainability? That's a big deal these days.
Huge. And ASML, they seem to be taking it seriously, at least from what they're putting out there. They've got a whole corporate responsibility report, goes into detail about their environmental impact, diversity, how they manage their supply chain.
They're following those GRI standards, right? The ones we talked about earlier.
They are working towards that sustainable future.
And the IFRS EU accounting standards, too, so there's that transparency.
Yep. It's not just talk, they're backing it up with action.
Which is important for investors, too, right?
Yes.
More and more, people are looking at those ESG factors, the environmental, social governance stuff.
Absolutely. It's becoming a major factor in investment decisions. ASML doing well on that front, that could be a big plus for them.
Okay, so another point in their favor.
Seems like it.
Well, we've covered a lot, from geopolitical risks to earnings projections, sustainability. Anything else you want to add before we move on to final thoughts?
Just a reminder, really. Investing in individual stocks, especially in a complex field like semiconductors, it's not something to jump into lightly.
Do your homework.
Exactly. Don't follow the hype. Do your own research. Understand what you're getting into. Make decisions that are right for you.
Wise words. We'll be back shortly to wrap up our deep dive into ASML, share some final thoughts on what all this means for our listeners.
Welcome back to our ASML deep dive. We've gone through a lot, haven't we? Their hold on the semiconductor world, those impressive financials, and even those potential risks and rewards, hanging out there.
A lot to unpack, that's for
How are
sure.
you?
It is. So now, let's kind of bring it all together. What have we learned? And more importantly, what does it all mean for our listener who's maybe thinking, is ASML something I should consider?
Yeah, the big question, I think the main takeaway here is investing in ASML is kind of like investing in the future of tech itself.
Bold statement.
Well, think about it. They're the crucial piece, the linchpin in this whole global push for innovation. AI, 5G, all that stuff. It kind of relies on ASML,
So the future's bright.
but
Hmm,
complicated.
definitely. There's no easy answer here. If our listener's trying to decide, should I or shouldn't I? I'd say there are a few key questions they got to ask themselves.
Okay, lay with us.
First one, simple but important. Do they believe in the long-term growth of the semiconductor industry? If the answer is no, ASML's probably not the right fit.
Makes sense. You're betting on tech continuing to advance, basically.
You are. Second question, are they okay with volatility? Because the semiconductor world, it's a roller coaster. Ups and downs, booms and busts. ASML, it requires some risk tolerance for sure.
Yeah.
And a long-term view, got to be in it for the long haul.
Exactly. And lastly, their own goals, their own time horizon. Are they looking for a quick win? Or are they okay holding on to ASML for years, maybe even decades, riding out any bumps along the way?
It's not just about numbers, is it? It's almost like understanding the story of ASML.
It is. It's their role in the tech landscape, their ability to adapt. Do you believe they can handle whatever challenges come next?
Because there will be challenges.
Guaranteed. And even beyond that, it's those intangible things. ASML's drive to innovate, their values, even their commitment to sustainability. Those things matter too, especially for long-term investments.
It's been fascinating, this deep dive. And honestly, I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have, but hopefully it's enough to get our listeners curious, spark some research of their own. That's what we're hoping for.
Because at the end of the day, the deep dive is about giving folks the knowledge to make their own choices. Whether they invest in ASML or not, at least they'll understand this company that's like quietly shaping the world.
The hidden giants, right. They're out there.
Exactly.
Sure.
So next time you're using your phone or your laptop or you hear about some cool new AI thing, remember ASML. They might just be the reason it's all possible.
They're the force behind the scenes pushing tech forward.
And that's a story worth knowing. All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into ASML. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure exploring this company with you.